Hello everyone, Kaoz here, and welcome to another old school RuneScape video. And tomorrow is the highly anticipated release of the Theater of Blood hard mode, and I thought it would be a pretty good chance to talk about recycling content in old school RuneScape. What actually is recycling content? What's the difference between recycled content and different game modes? And most importantly, is it healthy for the future of the game? Today we shall discuss. But before we continue, I would like to remind you that if you enjoyed today's video, we have a lot more like these in the channel where I discuss different topics that are actually suggested by you guys, and I would really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button, and if you really enjoy them, hitting that notification bell would also be a huge help. And thanks to your guys' feedback, I am actually going to be using the Orb of Oculus for the very first time in the channel as I show you a couple of Theater of Blood fights as we discuss today's topic. Now, it may seem that I am only going to talk about the Theater of Blood, but I want to make it more broad and more like a general topic as to what recycling content could mean for future updates or PVM releases, or maybe Raids 3, who knows. So, let's begin. Now, I think it would be a pretty good idea to give you guys my personal opinion as to what isn't recycling content in old school RuneScape, even though it may seem like it. In my personal opinion, Ironman mode, Deadman mode, and leagues. For those of you who don't know about these three, because maybe we have brand new players, the Ironman game mode is when you are a self-sufficient player, you get every single resource on your own, and you get no help from anyone other than maybe your main account to do some other random things. We have the Deadman tournament, which hasn't been around for a while, so if you don't know about this, I suggest you look it up because it's really fun and really competitive if you are into tournaments, especially related to RuneScape. But to give you a very general idea, players have, let's say, 1 or 2 weeks to prepare an account from scratch, and they give you, or I guess they don't give you, they give you a certain amount of time to get as many powerful weapons, powerful armor as you can, and then at the end of the tournament, players compete to eliminate each other because the top 256 players enter into the 1v1 phase where they fight each other for glory, and then they actually win real-life prizes or just the bragging rights for their clan. And last but not least, leagues is actually, we've had 2 iterations of these, and this is basically being restricted to a certain area of the game where you play as an Ironman, and then you have different tasks, different goals, and this is actually more competitive, I guess, because the more points you get, the higher you get into the rankings, and of course everyone competes for that Dragon Cup. So basically, from what I told you, what isn't recycling content is basically building a game mode for the game that you have to do from scratch once again. Even though it sounds like the same thing, I don't personally think it's recycling it because it gives you a brand new experience every time you enter one of these, either Ironman, Deadman, and leagues, because every one of these has their own objectives, even though it's something that's already like kind of predetermined, right? If you're an Ironman, you are a self-sufficient player, Deadman, you want to be #1, and leagues, you want that dragon trophy. So it's basically the same idea, but it's a different path for the whole game, and even if you play an unrestricted account, playing any one of these game modes is actually so refreshing because you get to do very different things in very different ways, right? Now, what is recycling content? We've had 3 of these, and if I am mistaken, you guys can give me your personal opinion. This is the Chambers of Xeric challenge mode, the Nightmare of Ashihama second phase, whatever, which is the Phosani's Nightmare, I don't know how to pronounce that, and upcoming we have the Theater of Blood hard mode. Now, what is the difference between these and the previous ones that I mentioned? Now, obviously these are very specific parts of the game, but these are aimed towards the end game player, or like the high level PVMer, that it's basically, okay, for people who maybe are not bored of, you know, this high level PVM, but maybe want to test their skills in a different way. This is especially useful and aimed towards the high-level players that would like to, I guess, have a refreshing experience with one of these. And obviously, the very first time the Chambers of Xeric, the Phosani's Nightmare, and the Theater of Blood hard mode coming up were released, this is actually what happened with, giving players a different experience. So if we look at the release dates and the calendar, what happened? The Chambers of Xeric was released in January of 2017, and Chambers of Xeric, or Xeric, I don't know how to pronounce that, was actually released in May of 2018, over a year later. When it comes to the Nightmare, this is kind of a, maybe not weird, but this is like a different thing. It was released in February of 2020, and the Fosani's Nightmare Challenge was actually released 1 month later. But just in May of 2021, it was released that it's going to be coming back as a permanent thing, where players can actually challenge it as many times as they want, and that is going to be, I guess, a new phase of the recycled content. Now we have this same thing coming up tomorrow with the Theater of Blood hard mode, and the Theater of Blood was originally released in June of 2018. And obviously the hard mode is going to be coming in June of 2021, just 3 years later. So we have these 3 instances of quote-unquote recycled content, and I want to tell you guys, or I want to hear your guys' opinion. As we had in the previous episode, which wasn't exactly the best video to release, as we've had many controversial comments because of my opinion. But I want to ask you guys, for you, what is recycled content in old school RuneScape, and do you think is actually good for the long term of the game? Now, one thing that we have to mention, I guess, is that a lot of people for some reason have been asking for the Inferno hard mode, and the Inferno was originally released in June of 2017. Now, this is way different because right now, the Inferno is the most difficult challenge for a solo player, especially if you go in not knowing a lot about PVMing, right? So I guess even the Jagex moderators have said, or even high-level players, that mechanically there's not a lot of things that could be changed in the Inferno to make it way more difficult, even though there are some obvious answers like, you know, get rid of 1 pillar, make more monsters, make more waves, you know, increase more nibblers and whatever. So this recycling content for other parts of the game is actually a good idea for future content for one reason. There was a leak, and I'm not going to include it here on screen because I don't really want to spread misinformation. I am just going to tell you that this is a leak that is not confirmed, and it's basically a couple of changes that happened in the Theater of Blood for every single boss. Obviously, it's going to be more difficult, and I guess that these could be the base for, if not an Inferno hard mode, it could be a really good idea for a future Raids 3, because it means that Jagex is going to have more ideas to base their, you know, new challenges from, and that would be a really cool idea for old school content to inspire more old school content. So you guys can let me know your opinion. So in order to close this video, I want to talk about where is recycling useful. In my personal opinion, I think this is only going to be useful for end game content that end game players or late game players, or whatever you want to call them, or completionists, that those types of players can be happy redoing over and over and over again. Sadly, I don't think recycling content is going to work for the early and the mid game, because honestly, if it's not free to play, players are not going to be spending a lot of time in the early and the mid-game content because, you know, you just do it, you get your experience, you get your collection log, and then you just move on. But then for the Theater of Blood and for Chambers of Xeric, there is a lot of skill ceiling, and the things you can do, you can learn, you can improve so much, is going to give players that, I guess, satisfaction, knowing that they can actually do this, no problem. So I guess this also means that we have to limit the recycled content to PVMing, because that is where, I guess, a lot of players are going to be spending a lot of time, because you need to keep those players happy. And that is exactly where we come to the last part of the video, where I answer, is recycling content in old school RuneScape healthy? Number 1, yes. In my personal opinion, recycling content is good because it's really fast for development time. Now, you guys are gonna say like, you don't know anything about developing, how should you know? But it's a really good base for the developers to base their idea, and then they don't really need to expand a whole ton. What I mean is that they already have the mechanics, they already have the assets, they already have the rewards, so they don't need to put that much time into developing something as if it was from scratch, and that saves a lot of time for the developers to do, something really cool in not that long of a time, right? Number 2 is that Jagex knows that if it's something that endgame players are going to do, it means that it's something that they like and something that they are going to enjoy right away. So the Theater of Blood hard mode is, something that they can be pretty confident that the endgame player is going to enjoy, because there's a lot of players who do it, even years and years after the release of the game. And number 3, if you keep the endgame players and the addicted people to old school RuneScape happy with more and more endgame content, the better it is going to be for the lifetime of the game, as you are going to keep those players, they are going to keep paying for membership, even if it's with bonds. Those bonds have to come from somewhere. Because I think it is much better to keep those players rather than attracting new ones. If you have an advertisement for the Theater of Blood hard mode for brand new players in social media, they go like, yeah, that looks cool, but that doesn't tell me anything. But if you give the average player something to aspire to, obviously that is going to, keep them for the long run. Now, we already talked about if this is healthy. Now, is this good for the content? For me, it's a maybe. Now, as long as it's not often, I don't really see a problem with it. It's not like I am this type of person that goes like, I don't really like this because it's dev time that it could be used somewhere else. I don't really care if it's not as often, and if the content is cool, we get to see the streamers, the video makers doing it, that's really nice. And as long as the thing truly changes and it gives you a brand new experience, even if it's with the same content, I think it could be really, really cool for the game as a whole. And lastly, it is good for, I guess, it is a nice base for future content. As I said before, you can actually get an inspiration for the Theater of Blood hard mode for some mechanics to make it somewhere in the game in the future. So it's not that crazy of an idea, and recycling content could potentially be really good when applied in, I guess, a successful part of the game. I don't think we have seen a bit of recycled content that flops and players don't like, but so far I think Jagex has a pretty good grip on the situation, and that should do it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave me a comment telling you, or telling me what you think, and of course enjoy the release of the Theater of Blood hard mode. You guys have a great day, have fun, and I'll see you then.